The ink is barely dry on a Supreme Court ruling that reshaped the rules on redistricting, and already states across the South are moving fast to redraw the lines. Here in Tennessee, the Republican supermajority in the legislature passed a new congressional map that splits Memphis three ways. Protests flooded the state capitol as that vote was taken. And this afternoon, I'm joined by Rob Weiner, director of the Voting Rights Project at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, an organization that has spent more than a decade fighting to protect black voters and other historically targeted communities at the ballot box. Welcome, Rob. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So let's start with the Supreme Court's decision in Calais versus Louisiana. In plain terms, what did that ruling change? And then why did it essentially give states like Tennessee a green light to redraw the maps right now?
So the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965 to protect the voting rights of black people and other people of color across the country because they'd been shut out, particularly in the South. And it was the crown jewel of the civil rights movement. Section 2 said it was illegal to discriminate against people based on their color, and the court has made it much, much harder than it has ever been to bring a discrimination case under Section 2.
So this new map splits Memphis, the state's only majority black congressional district, into three Republican-leaning districts. From a voting rights standpoint, what is the real-world impact of that on black voters in Memphis and Shelby County?
Well, the black people in Memphis had a majority of the population in the city, and they had a majority of District 9, and they therefore had the opportunity to elect their candidates of choice. It was the only black district among the 9, the only majority black district among the 9 districts in Tennessee. And now that majority population of District 9 is spread among 3 districts that stretch out, as Congressman Cohen said, like snakes. One almost all the way to Nashville. And the population of Memphis, the black population, is divided almost exactly into thirds. And they therefore, in none of those districts can they any longer elect their candidates of choice. They are the tail on the dog of that district.
This map was passed just over a week after the Supreme Court's ruling. How alarming is that speed? And is Tennessee an isolated case? I know it's not. Are you seeing this kind of rapid redistricting push happening in other states as well, right?
Yes, it's happened, and it's happened in Florida. It's happening in Louisiana. Alabama is redistricting, and it's they say it's partisanship, but when you eliminate the only majority black district in Tennessee, just days after the Supreme Court has made it harder to sue for discrimination, common sense tells you, particularly when you divide things up just so neatly into thirds, common sense tells you that this is not partisanship. This is race, because the court is letting them do it now. And it's unseemly, and it's unfair, and it's unconstitutional.
Final question. Voters who feel like their voices are being taken away, what do you want them to know? And is there anything they can do about it right now?
I want them to know that they have a right to be heard. And the vote is still the best way to be heard, and their right to speak out publicly. People need to let their congressmen and let their legislators know that this is not acceptable. We live in a democracy. that respects the voting rights of every person to an equal voice. And that is what we all should be striving for. That is what we all should be insisting on.
Well, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law says legal challenges to Tennessee's new map are still pending. We will continue to follow this story as it develops. And thanks again for joining us today, Rob Weiner with that organization. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.